Okay, and welcome back to another episode of the Cedric Black Podcast. And this is part two, I guess. Yeah, this is part two in our series. If you tuned in last week, you knew that we were talking about babies and the noise effects, and how noise affects babies. In this series, I think I mentioned that. If I didn't mention, I failed to mention that the series was about noise and mental health across lifespans and how it affects different stages of life that we go through. So that's where we are. We are on the second episode in this series. I go back to where I first started with just introducing noise pollution and what it means. In my earlier episodes, I always said that I wanted to introduce it to someone who may not be familiar with the term. So, what noise pollution is, if you don't already know? Well, you know what it is, but maybe you're not used to hearing the term noise pollution the way I was not used to hearing the term noise pollution. Okay, so noise pollution is unwanted sounds. The sounds that we don't plan to take in. The sounds that disrupt our daily lives in some way. For example, noise pollution comes from various sources like traffic, cars. It could be loud trucks outside. It could be lawnmowers from the neighbor or lawnmowers from you yourself. Or it could be construction noise, any noise that disrupts your day if you're trying to have a peaceful moment, anything that disrupts your peace. It could be a continuous sound or it could be a short sound. What we've learned over the course of the months that I've done all the episodes, short bursts of sound have a less effect than the prolonged sounds. Or a sound that's stretched out for a period of time. The length of a sound and also the loudness of a sound affects how it affects us, affects the way that it makes us feel. So that's just a quick primer on noise pollution and what it is and some sources of noise pollution. I know if you tuned in last week, you heard me talk about my vacation and how it interrupted. Well, my vacation didn't interrupt anything. It's just that I dropped the ball because I failed to upload my episode before I left vacation. So that left a gap in my promise that I try to fulfill to the show. But I'm back on track now. And it's raining outside today. It's a rainy day. I'm looking outside my window and I was watching on the news that there was a hurricane and some bad storms that's happening in Galveston, Texas, in the Houston area. So if you live in that area, or if you know someone, family or friends that live in those areas, please check on them. And my prayers are out to anyone that lives in those families. Well, anyone that lives in those areas, I'm sorry. So we were talking about noise pollution and the effects that it has on various lifespans, and especially school-age children. I feel like they're especially sensitive to noise because it can affect their learning because they're in the stages of developing their minds. This is an important stage in their lives because their brains are being developed. They're in school and they're having to adjust every day to the classroom environment. They leave home, then they have to adjust to a classroom environment, then they come back home to readjust again. And the noise in classrooms make it hard for a lot of kids to concentrate. And if they can't concentrate, they can't do well. And if they can't do well in their studies, it can, and a lot of times does have a lasting effect throughout the course of their lives as they continue to grow. And if the classroom is noisy, teachers have a hard time translating the message over to the kids. And a lot of teachers can probably attest to this because I'm no longer in the classroom. I used to be at one point in my life, but right now I'm just an observer. But I believe that teachers can attest to noise leading to behavioral issues in classrooms. And as the noise increase, behaviors increase, or behavioral issues can increase. I've heard of, I was around teachers a lot some years back, and I would always hear the term classroom control. And I never really quite understood what it meant. I had an idea from an outside perspective, but not from an educational standpoint as a teacher, what classroom control meant until I was in a classroom and I was observing, and I was fortunate enough to be in a classroom with a seasoned teacher. And I was also in a classroom with a new teacher. So I got to understand the concept behind classroom control, especially as the noise increased. So teachers do have a tough job. Let me say this. If you're a teacher, my hat's off to you, and you have the utmost respect from me. And I want to thank you for the job that you do. I know you don't hear it enough, but I want to thank you for the job that you do, especially with the kids coming up now. It's tougher. It gets tougher every year. It gets tougher and tougher. And the noise increases because now kids have a attention span that's shorter now. And what I've seen in a lot of kids, that if their attention is short, they find other things to grab their attention. But noise in the classroom makes it really difficult. Even me being an outsider sitting in the classroom as an adult, I had a hard time focusing. And in one of my other episodes, I talked about the noisy environment that I was immersed in when my wife and I attended a presentation. It was a timeshare presentation, and it was extremely noisy in there. And that was by design. And that's a sales tactic. That's one of my episodes that I talk about that. But I'm just relating the noise, that environment, to a classroom environment for children trying to learn something, or teachers trying to teach. Now, I was in an environment where I was being sold something, but I was trying to learn, and the salesperson was teaching. I couldn't concentrate on what they were saying. And the only thing that I wanted to do was escape. I wanted that presentation to be done and over with because it was stressful for me. My brain was trying to compute what that person was talking about, what she was trying to convey to me, the message that she was trying to convey. And taking that in, and my brain is trying to filter out all the noise that's around me, because we were in a location where there was a lot of other people around us. We were just immersed. So picture it as a bigger classroom, just another classroom with just adults. But not only did we have adults talking and other sales people talking, there was noise from outside traffic. There was noise from the kitchen utensils because people were eating. They had a buffet set up, so people were fixing food. You can hear silverware clanging against their plates and everything. So that environment, and picture that type of noise, but just without that environment, but just the noise itself, and translate it to a classroom where classrooms are noisy, and you have where we have children that's there to learn. But the problem with that is, how do you control it? I'm sure that's, if you're a veteran teacher, you've come up with some tricks for classroom or for noise management or classroom management. But if you're a parent, I would say help teachers. Really, I would say if you can spend some time in the classroom to get a firsthand view, firsthand experience on how noisy it is, and just observe. Look at the children, and observe the teacher and how she or he is trying to balance the noise and teaching. But there's ways that we can help keep classrooms quieter by having some study areas. And if the classroom is big enough, you could create study areas, section off a study area in the classroom, or you can have study time, where this is a time for quietness, everybody studying at the same time. But it takes some work. It takes a community and it takes support from teachers, administration, children, and parents to all work together to create this environment for learning for kids. Because kids are so used to noise now. They're adapting to it the same way that I did when I was a young kid. Although at that time there wasn't as many noise sources as there are now. There's always been noise sources, but it seems like year after year, it increases. So for a kid to have to balance the noise when their brains are still being developed and they don't really know how to balance that, they just adapt to it. And same way I did, or generations before me, we just accept it as this is part of life. And yes, noise is part of life and you can't escape it. But the awareness is key. Being aware of how noisy it is, being aware of what the noise sources are, and being aware of the importance of knowing this information and how it can affect you and how it affects your learning and how it would affect your overall sense of feeling and how it makes you feel. I think it's the most important thing to take in from this episode. And I know that I keep saying I want to try to keep these episodes short and to the point, but sometimes it's just necessary to speak a little bit more into it, because this episode, I believe, is really the most important right now, because this is a stage where kids are learning and their brains are being shaped and developed. But the question that we want to ask is, do we really want their brains shaped and developed where it includes noise? Because if so, then when it's quiet, they find there's a problem. They can't adapt to it. There's something wrong if it's quiet, because we've already been conditioned to want noise, to cheer for noise. If you're at a concert, it's noisy. And if you're at a concert and if you're in the crowd and it's quiet, the entertainers on stage are going to say, let's make some noise. So noise is promoted. Noise is encouraged. And so as long as noise is, there's nothing wrong with being in a concert, and there's nothing wrong with the crowd being active. But that's just an example of noise being promoted and encouraged. We're encouraged to be loud, and as things are encouraged to be loud, trucks are loud, traffic is loud, construction is loud, the equipment that they use to build houses and construction is loud. Everything is loud, but we just have to be aware of what these sources are and how it affects us. So in the classroom, let's think about what the noise sources are in the classroom. I would say pinpoint noise sources. Every classroom is probably going to be different because they do different things. Pinpoint what the noise sources are and start from there. That probably wasn't as short as I thought it was going to be or as short as I planned it to be, but felt like it was necessary. So thank you once again. Thank you for giving me another chance, for checking out the show. And just know that noise pollution is around. It's not going anywhere. And it affects everybody, no matter what their age, no matter what our age is, it affects us. And we all have to be mindful of the noise around us. And we have to take steps to reduce it. But the main thing that we need to do is be able to, outside of being aware of noise, is identify the noise sources, where the noise is coming from. Because if we know where they're coming from, we could better control it. There's things that we can't control. If I'm in my house, I can only control an airplane going by so much. I can't control the airplane flying and the noise that it makes. But if it's extremely loud, I can wear headphones until it passes over. So I do have some control over the noise source. In the same way in the classroom. If you're a teacher or if you're a student, identify where the noise is coming from. And if it's something that you can control, do your best to control it, even if it's for a short period of time. For teachers, create the quiet zones, create the quiet time. I know a lot of classrooms do have quiet time, but if you can't, or if you can, create that quiet time and create more study times. Any little bit helps, any small amount helps. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Cedric Black Podcast, and I hope you found this information helpful. Until next time, stay mindful of your surroundings and take care.